Now you will never get her back.
Alan Wake's ending is a strange one. It's cryptic and hard to explain, with a focus on emotion and narrative over silly little things like, logic and reason. However, while it's not entirely clear what's actually happening, there is an explanation for the finale and what it all means, which we're going to work through now. Also, it should go without saying, of course, major spoilers ahead. We'll be discussing the Alan Wake ending here and referring to events throughout the game. If you've not played or finished it yet, maybe go and do that and then come back to this, unless you don't mind the whole game basically getting spoiled for you.
Alice?
The final scene sees Alan willingly jump into Cauldron Lake to save his wife Alice, who was taken by the Dark Presence, the supernatural entity behind the events of the whole game. The Presence has been trapped in the lake for decades, using and abusing the creativity of numerous people to increase its reach and power. It has the power to turn artistic creations into reality, and is the origin for the evil that torments you throughout the game. A lot of what happens at the end was actually made to occur by Alan himself when he wrote his book/prophecy during the week-long blackout at the start of the game. However, because Alan needed to create art that he actually believed in, it had to have some narrative strength and realism. He couldn't just write, "and they all lived happily ever after with free cake." It wouldn't feel like an honest ending to him for what's been a very dark story. So, while what happens doesn't make a lot of logical sense, it feels appropriate by the standards of an Alan Wake story, where it has real power thanks to the Dark Presence. Now, this power to make stories real is how Alan uses the clicker, a small light switch his mother gave him as a child to help his fear of the darkness, which he uses to destroy the Dark Presence. As well as to defeat Barbara Jagger, the drowned wife of a former poet, the Presence uses as a vessel. Because he'd previously written the clicker had that specific power in his story, it does also at the ending. However, despite defeating the Dark Presence, Alice is still trapped in an alternate dimension known only as the Dark Place. And Alan writes an ending where he saves her, which is where things get tricky. Alan Wake ultimately ends up trapped in the shadowy Dark Place dimension with a doorway deep in Cauldron Lake. This is where Alice is taken by the Dark Presence right at the beginning of the game, and Alan writes an escape for her in which he dives in, defeats the darkness, and gets her back to the real world, not to mention seemingly cancelling out all of the Dark Presence's influence on Bright Falls. However, Alan's ending means that he's trapped in the Dark Place because he couldn't write a completely happy ending for himself that he found artistically convincing. It means he effectively chooses to trap himself in the Dark Place. However, that doesn't mean it ends there.
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.
Alan, wake up.
The very last line of Alan Wake is a deeply cryptic one, with no clear explanation as to what it means. Remedy has never really expanded on the exact meaning, leaving it up to interpretation until the sequel arrives. It's possible it means the Dark Place is larger than Alan first realized, either in size or power, or that he's admitting he's not likely to escape, as the scale of what he's up against is so massive. He is apparently still alive, with the 2 downloadable story expansions for Alan Wake, The Signal and The Writer, carrying on Alan's story and explaining in greater detail what he experiences in the Dark Place. In both cases, he's confronted with unstable or dangerous aspects of his own personality, manifested into other beings by the Dark Place's power. Alan defeats them, or rather becomes whole with them, and everything concludes with him starting to write a new story that will enable him to escape, titled Return. However, because he's only starting that story, we don't know if he's going to be successful in the DLC, only that he's trying. So that's everything we currently know about the original ending of Alan Wake, at least until 2023 when Alan Wake 2 arrives, and hopefully shed some light on what it all means. Will Alan finally escape? Can the Dark Presence ever be defeated? Only time will tell.